What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. The massacre that aided in the abolition of slavery, and the first black aristocrat, Dido Elizabeth Belle, was England's first known aristocrat of African descent. She lived most of her life at Kenwood, the estate of her great-uncle and guardian, the first Earl of Mansfield, who was also the highest-ranking judge in England and Wales. But who was Dido Belle? And how did she find herself among the upper class of 18th century England? From beginning to end, the Dido Elizabeth Belle story is unusual. Belle was brought to England as a young child and raised by extended family members as an aristocrat by an enslaved mother and a British naval officer. However, as charmed as her life may have been, she was forced to face discrimination due to her skin color and illegitimacy throughout her life. Dido Belle lived during the early days of the abolitionist movement in England, and Lord Mansfield was a judge on several prominent slavery-related cases. Through her duties to him as a secretary, she was likely aware of what happened in the Zong massacre, a horrific case of mass slayings on a slave ship. The events that shaped her lifetime have made her a modern-day icon, and set in motion a wave of abolitionist support that eventually led to the freeing of enslaved people around the world. Her story was brought to light by a singular portrait. This portrait, once thought to have been painted by Johann Zoffany, shows Dido Elizabeth Belle alongside Lady Elizabeth Murray. In the 1700s, it was extremely unusual for a woman of color to be depicted in a portrait in the manner that Belle was. They never looked directly at the artist and were frequently added as accessories to the white people being painted. They also never appeared higher than the main subject. Lady Elizabeth is actually reaching out to Belle, in addition to the fact that she is looking straight ahead and is a little higher than Belle. As for Belle's pose, as well as her turban, there are theories that the painter was trying to Indianize her. Her father had worked in India at one point in his life, and her gesture of pointing to her cheek is very similar to a statue of Krishna. According to Amma Asante, director of Belle, a 2013 film dramatizing Belle's life, this painting flipped tradition and everything the 18th century told us about portraiture. Today, it hangs in Scone Palace in Perth, Scotland. She probably knew about a significant abolitionist case. One of the most well-known cases involving slavery in the 1700s was the Zong insurance case, which was also known as the Zong massacre. Lord Mansfield, Belle's guardian, was one of the judges in charge of the case. The Zong, which was originally a Dutch slave ship, was purchased by Englishmen and used to transport 442 African slaves to the Caribbean in 1781. The ship made a navigational error and overshot Jamaica, leading to a critical shortage of drinking water. The crew claimed that in order to save the healthy slaves, those who were ill were thrown overboard, 132 people in total. The legal situation in England was straightforward. The slave ship's owners filed a lawsuit against their insurance company, claiming that the company refused to compensate them for the loss of what they considered to be goods. Blacks are goods and property. It is madness to accuse these well-serving honorable men of slaying, was the chilling description of how African slaves were viewed in the 18th century. The case is the same as if Wood had been thrown overboard. At the time, Belle served as Lord Mansfield's secretary, and presumably was exposed to documents and letters about the case. In the 2013 film Belle, she becomes actively involved. However, historians have no way of knowing what her actual role in the case was, or if she had one at all. In the end, the original claim was dropped. Although the insurance company demanded a new trial, there is no record stating that one actually took place. However, once knowledge of the case began to circulate, it lit a spark that provided vital fuel for the abolitionist movement. Lord Mansfield's decisions as a judge were well liked by abolitionists. The first Earl of Mansfield was the Lord Chief Justice of Britain, the most powerful judge in the country. He presided over a landmark case in 1772 involving James Somerset, a fugitive slave. He ruled that slave masters had no jurisdiction over escaped slaves while they were in England, and could not remove them from British soil against their will, making Somerset a free man. Lord Mansfield didn't want slavery on his own soil, even though it was practiced elsewhere. The ruling was considered a key moment in the abolitionists' fight to end the slave trade, and many believe his anti-slavery views were inspired by his great-niece Belle. She was treated like family, but only around family members. Even though Belle lived a life of luxury as part of the top 1% of England, her place in her home was complicated. She was treated like the rest of the family, when it was just the family, says William Murray, a descendant of Lord Mansfield. Where it got awkward is when they had guests in. Belle did not eat dinner with the rest of the family when they had guests. She was too high status to eat with the servants, but not high status enough to eat with her own family. However, she often rejoined the group after dinner for coffee or walks around the estate. She was raised alongside the daughter of another family member. In 1766, Belle and another young girl who had also lost their mother were brought to Lord Mansfield's house. Lady Elizabeth Murray's father, a cousin of Lord Mansfield, was an ambassador to Austria and France while she was raised at Kenwood. Belle was chosen by Lord and Lady Mansfield to be Elizabeth's playmate, and the two girls became close friends as children. They were both considered family, but they each received very different allowances. Belle received £30 each year, while Elizabeth received around £100. The Lord and Lady never had children of their own. Belle and Elizabeth were the only children they ever knew, and they reportedly cared for them as if they were their own. She held a very unusual role in Lord Mansfield's home. Belle's role at Kenwood was just as unusual for the time as everything else about her life. She was part of the family, and reportedly had a very close relationship with her great-uncle Lord Mansfield, which some fellow aristocrats frowned upon. She had many responsibilities around the house, including running the estate's dairy farm and poultry yard. She also served as Lord Mansfield's secretary, a job typically performed by men. After Lady Mansfield passed away in 1784, Belle continued to live at Kenwood and took care of her great-uncle until he passed away at the age of 88 in 1793. He suffered from rheumatism, so she read the paper for him in the mornings. She was brought to England after her mother passed away. Belle was brought to England in 1766. She was around 5 years old at the time. She had been living with her mother, Maria Belle, until she passed away. Her father, a naval officer, could not take care of Belle on his own, so he sought help from his well-connected family. He convinced his uncle, the first Earl of Mansfield, to take in his young daughter, thus providing her with protection and a comfortable life. She was born to a naval officer and a slave. Belle not only endured prejudice as a black woman in 18th-century England, but also as an illegitimate child. Her baptism records mention only her mother, an enslaved woman named Maria Belle or Belle, not her father Sir John Lindsay, who was a British naval officer. Historians have noted that it is unclear whether the relationship was voluntary or not. After Lindsay seized a slave ship in which Maria was a passenger, it's possible that the two met. According to historical records, Maria accompanied Lindsay to Pensacola, Florida, in 1764, when Belle was 3 years old. In 1772, Lindsay eventually gave Maria a town lot and gave her freedom in the same document. Florida was probably where her parents lived for a while. University of West Florida. Archaeologist Margot Stringfield believes that attitudes toward infidelity in 1700s Florida were much more relaxed than they were back in England. America and the Caribbean were regarded as the frontier, devoid of certain regulations. It's possible that during the early years of their relationship, John Lindsay and Maria Belle lived together in Pensacola, Florida, at least while Lindsay wasn't at sea. In an interview with the Telegraph, Stringfield said, "It was not unusual for men in frontier settings to have women with them that were not their wives, and that Maria probably had women friends in a similar situation to herself here. She was one of thousands of children in England who were mixed race. Many aspects of Belle's life were unique, but she was far from the only person of color in 18th-century London. When she was born in 1761, the city was home to 10,000 black people and a countless number of mixed-race residents. Belle was not always welcome, though. She undoubtedly served as a reminder of British men's behavior in the Caribbean because she was a woman of mixed race. While sailing or managing plantations, many men spent extended periods of time away from their wives. The fact that a lot of children born on plantations were mixed race was just a part of life. Her later life is not well known, though she did get married and have 3 children. When Lord Mansfield passed away in 1793, he left Belle a respectable inheritance and clearly stated in his will that she was a free woman. Belle left Kenwood 5 months after his death and got married to John de Venier, the son of a reverend. After that, the details of her life get hazy. Historians know that she had 3 children and passed away of natural causes at age 41. She is said to have been buried in a different cemetery, and nobody knows where her grave is now. The movie Belle took several liberties while telling her story. The broad strokes of Belle's life were captured by the screenwriters, but as is typical in Hollywood, some liberties were taken. One change involves Belle's husband. In real life she married a steward, but in the film her future husband is a law student. The biggest liberty taken is with Belle's involvement in the shocking Zong insurance case, which her great-uncle was overseeing as a judge. In the movie, the case inspires Belle to become active in the fight to abolish slavery. However, she did not appear to actively participate in the trial in real life, and there is no evidence that she became an abolitionist. The life of Dido Elizabeth Belle is one of extraordinary complexity and contrast. It is a story that combines wealth and racism, privilege and prejudice, compassion and justice, and so on. Born in 1761 to an enslaved African woman, Maria Bell, and a British naval officer, Sir John Lindsay, Dido's very existence defied the rigid social order of 18th-century Britain. She was raised in one of England's grandest estates, Kenwood House, under the care of her great-uncle William Murray, the first Earl of Mansfield, despite being a black child in a world ruled by white aristocracy thanks to her father's insistence and the influence of his powerful family. The Lord Chief Justice of England and Wales, the highest-ranking judge in the country, was Lord Mansfield. His legal decisions would have an impact on the course of the abolitionist movement and on the future of the British Empire. As a result, Dido Belle found herself at a remarkable intersection of personal privilege and social conflict. Her life at Kenwood was comfortable, lavish even, but always marked by the limits society placed upon her due to her race and her illegitimate birth. She shared her childhood with her cousin Lady Elizabeth Murray, and enjoyed the attentions of a household that considered both girls beloved, if not equally so. She was, according to many accounts, treated like family within the walls of Kenwood. Dido received a modest annual allowance of £30 compared to Elizabeth's £100 and was not permitted to dine with guests, though she often joined the family afterward for coffee or walks. This odd in-betweenness, too noble for the servants' hall, yet not noble enough for the dining room, epitomized her complicated position in the aristocracy. However, Belle developed into a well-educated, capable, and self-assured young woman within the context of this unusual upbringing. She also took an active, though historically undocumented, role in one of the most significant legal cases of her time, the Zong massacre. Britain's conscience was shaken by this case, which revealed the brutal logic of the slave trade when insurance companies were asked to reimburse ship owners for the loss of more than 130 enslaved Africans who were thrown overboard. Lord Mansfield, as Chief Justice, heard the case, and while he didn't hand down a direct ruling on its moral implications, the trial ignited a wave of outrage and galvanized the abolitionist movement. As her uncle's secretary, Belle almost certainly came across correspondence and documents pertaining to this trial. Though history cannot confirm the extent of her influence, it is difficult to imagine that her presence in his life had no impact on Lord Mansfield's increasingly progressive views on slavery, especially considering his earlier ruling in the James Somerset case of 1772, in which he declared that slavery was unsupported by English common law, and that escaped slaves could not be forcibly removed from England. This decision, which suggested that Britain would not uphold the ownership of humans, at least on its own soil, was historic and profoundly symbolic. While Belle may not have publicly advocated for abolition, her very existence within Lord Mansfield's household, and the affection with which he treated her, challenged the dehumanizing logic of slavery and may have softened his judicial heart. Even the now famous, long-lost portrait of Dido Belle and Lady Elizabeth Murray is a radical statement. In contrast to typical portraiture from the 18th century, in which people of African descent were depicted as aloof companions or exotic accessories, Belle is shown to be as lively, animated, and present as her cousin. She points to her cheek with a smile, dressed in vibrant silk and adorned with a turban, a nod to her father's time in India and possibly a deliberate Indianizing gesture by the artist. Some art historians